If you're Real Dub Nation, hit the like button right now and subscribe to the channel, because today's conversation is the kind that messes with any fan's head. Turn on notifications too, because the way things are going, a move could drop out of nowhere and flip the season upside down. And I'll tell you straight, there are stretches when the noise behind the scenes gets louder than the sound of the ball bouncing. And today, for the first time in a long while, the back room gave such a clear signal, it's like someone opened the door and let us hear everything. Because yes, I genuinely believe Joe Lacob let slip, even if unintentionally, what the thread is that guides Golden State's thinking when it comes to the trade deadline. And it wasn't in an interview, it wasn't in a statement, it wasn't on a stage. It was in the most dangerous place possible when the pressure tightens, a direct reply to a fan. And when an owner replies to an email, that's rarely just politeness. That's a thermometer. That's the temperature of the chaos reaching the top floor. And when the chaos reaches the top floor, something starts to move, even if it's only to stop the whole thing collapsing. But before we get into that reply, we need to talk about the piece that became an unexpected symbol of this stretch. And I know that just hearing the name makes some people laugh because it sounds like the sort of topic that starts small and disappears fast. But not here. Not this time. It grew, and it turned into a serious demand. Pat Spencer. What's happening is simple to understand and hard to swallow. Pat is on a two-way contract, and that's not an administrative footnote. It puts a limit on how many games he can be active for in the regular season while he stays on that type of deal. It's not paperwork. It's a clock. It's a countdown. It's the team looking at the bench and knowing that if they keep using him the way they have been, there's going to come a point where they simply won't be able to put him on the floor without changing his contract. And when someone really plugged in around the league says the conversion is basically inevitable, the hidden message isn't just, he deserves it. The message is, the franchise is going to be forced to make a real decision. And then you stop and think, why does this matter so much right now? Because an end-of-the-bench decision is almost never just about the end of the bench. When you have to turn a two-way into a standard deal, you change a roster spot. And when you change a roster spot, you change fit. You change the rotation. You change choices that look small, but push other bigger choices. It's like pulling one tiny piece, and suddenly the whole board opens up for a move we weren't even seeing. The detail that makes all of this even more revealing is how Pat has been treated, even before any official signing. He gets activated often, even on nights when he plays little or doesn't appear at all, and that says a lot. It says the staff trusts him. It says that internally he's already seen as a legitimate part of the group, not a guy who's there to make up numbers. Someone they want around, want ready, want available. And when a player in that position starts being treated like that, the question isn't, will he stay? The question becomes, who's going to make space? Because the fan feels something strange this season. There are people producing in limited minutes and, at the same time, looking like they're always standing on the edge of a cliff. And that irritation grows when you see Pat check in with a courage that doesn't match the size of his deal. He plays like someone who has nothing guaranteed, and precisely because of that, he delivers like he's fighting for every second of life in the league. When he's had a bigger opportunity, the production has climbed. When he's taken threes, the ball has come out with conviction. And that matters. Conviction. Because basketball isn't just stats. It's rhythm. It's energy. It's reading the moment. There are games where you can see it instantly. The team looks lighter, more aggressive, more watchable with him out there. And with how up and down this season has been, watchable has become a massive value, and it's not like this appeared from nowhere. People inside have praised his profile publicly. The guy who works in silence, who prepares like he's about to play big minutes even knowing he might not leave the bench, who doesn't change his posture, doesn't change his mood, doesn't change his effort. Normally that becomes a nice quote everyone repeats and forgets. But here it became results. And when it becomes results, the nice quote becomes a demand. So the dilemma starts. Why haven't they turned this into full recognition yet? Why hold off the conversion? Why not lock in the spot and organize the rotation around what's working? And then the comparison that splits the fan base, whether people like it or not, shows up. Pat Spencer and Brandon Podziemski. And here we can be fair without making excuses. Podziemski has qualities. His three-point percentage has improved. That's a fact. But there's a big difference between hitting a few shots and being a real threat. A threat is volume with courage. It's letting it fly without hesitating when the pass arrives. It's punishing the defense before it can breathe. It's forcing adjustments. And more than that, it's understanding your role in the possession. There are moments where you watch and think, why did this ball spend so long in the hands of someone who shouldn't be running this possession? Why does an entire possession turn into a maze and end in a bad shot when there were obvious paths? And then the fan goes back to the same point, because the heart of the problem is consistency. You can't sell a young player as a bright future and, at the same time, ask for infinite patience while the present gets swallowed. And the present is getting swallowed. There are games that slip away, stretches that look stuck, nights when the team looks like it has weight in its legs, weight in its head, weight in its decisions. And when that happens, fans don't want pretty speeches. They want action. So, all right, Pat's conversion can happen, and everything suggests it will. But the question that hurts is different. When it happens, will it change anything for real? Or will it just be a signature so they don't lose the asset? Because signing is one thing. Trusting is another. Using is another. There are franchises that convert a deal and still keep the guy trapped in a box, like insurance locked in a cupboard. And if that happens here, the fan base will explode, because what they're asking for isn't a stamp, it's impact. And that's where the mood gets tenser, because the Pat Spencer topic doesn't live on its own. It connects to the next domino that scares everyone when it lands on the table, Jonathan Kuminga. I'm not saying he will be traded. I'm saying what a lot of people feel and few people say plainly. His situation has gotten weird. It's gotten cold. It feels like something you avoid touching too much, like one wrong move could break it. When a player starts piling up DNPs, when the explanation becomes coach's decision on repeat, there comes a point where it stops sounding like a game-to-game adjustment and starts sounding like a signal. Because in the NBA market, there's a cruel logic everyone knows. If you're even considering using a player as a trade piece, the worst thing that can happen is he gets injured. Simple as that. And when the pressure rises, some teams put a guy in a kind of freezer, not as punishment, as asset protection, to preserve possibilities, to avoid the risk. And then you put the pieces together and see how it all talks. If you're close to needing to open a spot because a two-way situation has become unavoidable, and at the same time you have a young player vanishing from the rotation and turning into a delicate subject, you can't pretend it's coincidence. It might be purely coaching. It might be a phase. But it might also be board setting, creating space, planning contracts, building flexibility. And once that feeling gets into a fan's head, every detail becomes a clue. Now we get to the point that poured petrol on the fire. Joe Lacob's reply to the fan. Picture the scene. A fan sends an email saying what all of Dub Nation screams online or thinks in silence. Do something, because there are things you can't keep propping up. You can't rely on a heroic night every time. You can't play like the season is an endless string of improvisations. The fan points to needs, to awkward fits, to the feeling that they're missing a big man who commands respect in the paint, to the waste when certain skills aren't used the right way. And then the reply comes. And the most important part isn't only what was said, it's the tone. Because when an owner replies along the lines of, "You think you're frustrated? I'm more frustrated," that's an admission there's a problem. That's the top recognizing the ground floor is shaking. The standard line would be hiding behind, "We believe in the roster," and "We'll keep working." But when he puts the weight on himself, he's saying, "I know, I feel it, I'm being held accountable, and I'm not comfortable either." But there's a detail that bothers a lot of people. How central the I becomes. Because the ideal setup is the owner handles the macro and the basketball front office drives the decisions. When the owner steps into the middle, it can look like strength, but it can also look like interference, impatience, control, and that creates a question fans don't like asking, but ask anyway. How much real autonomy exists in decision-making? How much is basketball and how much is internal politics? How much is the GM's vision and how much is the coach's preference? How much is rational and how much is emotional? Because in the middle of that exchange, there are hints like things are complicated, and indirect references to what the coach wants with certain players. And in backroom language, that can mean a lot without naming anyone. It can mean the coach doesn't trust someone. It can mean the coach wants a different profile. It can mean there's a clash of vision. And when the season is turbulent, any line like that becomes fuel. And right at the center of that fuel is a name that divides every debate, Jimmy Butler. And here it helps to separate two things people mix together. No one has to say he's a bad player to question the fit. No one has to say he's the problem to demand impact. There's a world where he isn't the issue, but also isn't being used as a big enough part of the solution. And that's where the criticism starts, especially when the salary and the weight of the name enter the equation. Because you don't pay big money to use a star like a supporting extra. You don't bring in a player who can control pace, create in the half court, and make decisions, then turn him into someone who spends entire possessions watching the ball swing without touching it at the right time. It's not about give him the ball and run away. It's about giving him the ball with intention, putting him at the heart of actions, letting him create real advantage instead of waiting for the possession to die and then begging for rescue. And what makes it more serious is that the coach himself has publicly shown self-criticism, admitting he needs to get Jimmy into rhythm more, bring the game to him, extract creation and scoring from him. And that's huge, because when a coach admits that, he's saying the plan wasn't working. And then the fan asks the question that stings. Why did it take so long? How many possessions were wasted with the ball stuck in the wrong hands while the player who should be organizing was parked off to the side waiting? An offense needs a clear hierarchy. And Golden State, in too many moments, looks like a team playing as if it's asking for a miracle at the end of every possession. And a miracle isn't a system, it's survival. And when you look back at the email and the tone, you can feel the subtext. Jimmy isn't the problem. Fine. Then he needs to be part of the solution consistently, not in flashes. More actions starting with him, more decisions running through him, more moments where the team says, "It's yours now." Because that's how expensive rosters justify themselves. Real responsibility in the hands of the people built to carry it. While that doesn't happen, what's left is fans watching the rotation and feeling like something is being held back, watching who gets minutes, who loses minutes, who disappears, who reappears, and thinking someone's being protected. A decision is being delayed. A move is being prepared. And that's the kind of climate where rumors become plausible, and plausibility becomes a serious conversation. Because there comes a moment where you understand, talk doesn't fix it. Either you accept the season as it is, or you move pieces. And Golden State is in that dangerous zone where accepting hurts, but moving also hurts, because moving costs. Moving means giving up a young player, a pick, a future. Moving demands courage and risk. And Lacob's line, "I'm working on it," can mean two things at once. It can mean he's ready to pay a price he used to avoid, and it can also mean he knows protecting the future too much can end up destroying the present. And that's why the ideas every fan has had at least once this season keep coming back. They need size in the paint. They need a center who commands respect. They need someone who secures rebounds, protects the rim, stops the team getting bullied physically. They need a steadier source of points in certain minutes. But every time you say they need, the next sentence arrives, and it's the hardest one. With what do you pay? Because the NBA doesn't give gifts. Every big trade asks for sacrifice, and that's exactly why the Pat Spencer situation, which sounds small, becomes huge. Because it forces a roster decision. And every roster decision right now has a domino effect. If the team needs to open space, someone gets moved. If someone gets moved, the market notices. And once the market notices, the calls change tone. The prices change. The conversations change. So I want to hear you on two things, because it says a lot about how you're reading this season too. Do you think Pat Spencer deserves more minutes than he's been getting? If yes, comment 61. If you think the coaching staff are right to hold him back and Podziemski should still have priority, comment 2. And the second question is heavier. Do you believe Kuminga is being kept on ice as a behind-the-scenes strategy? Comment Y if you think yes. Comment N if you think no. Now, in the middle of all this, another conversation has started to grow in a curious way, because it mixes on-court need with off-court impact. And that's where a name comes in that a lot of people know because of promise, because of size, and because he represents something bigger than just basketball: Kai Sotto. Kai, at 22, draws attention in a way that's impossible to ignore. The first thing is obvious: his height. But what makes the discussion real isn't just being tall. It's the mix of size with skill, coordination, and moments where he shows paint presence and offensive tools that don't look like someone who only takes up space. He has touch, he has reads, he has positioning. And when you add that up, a tempting idea appears. What if a guy like this joined the roster in an environment that knows how to develop talent, inside a system that values intelligence and movement? But then comes the part people underestimate. The jump to the NBA is brutal. It's not only playing against the best, it's playing at the best's speed, under the best's pressure, through the best's contact, while they hunt every weakness non-stop. The league doesn't forgive details. It doesn't let you hide a flaw. If you take half a second too long, they strip you. If you rotate wrong, they punish it. If you lose a rebound from laziness, they dunk on you. For any young player, it's a shock. And even so, the idea of Kai with Golden State isn't only about the floor. It's about symbolism. It's about community. The Bay Area is defined by diversity, and there's a huge Filipino community there, passionate, loud, loyal. Bringing in a Filipino player with Kai's visibility wouldn't be just another athlete on the roster. It would be representation. It would be pride. It would be a bridge to millions of fans worldwide. Imagine what that would do to the atmosphere at Chase Center when a fan base sees itself in someone. Imagine the energy, the pulse, the feeling of, this is ours too. And beyond the arena, there's the size of the brand. Golden State is already global, but certain connections open specific markets with massive force, especially in Southeast Asia, where basketball is a real passion and the attention is intense. But then the conversation snaps back to hard reality. For that to work, Kai would need to be ready to handle the NBA's pace and not become an easy target defensively. He'd need to adapt his body, his reads, his lateral speed, his decision-making under pressure. And if there's one thing the NBA does to young bigs, it's test everything. Pick and roll over and over, pulling them out of comfort, forcing fast choices, punishing any hesitation. The good news for him is that if there's a place where development can accelerate, it's inside a franchise that has historically worked fundamentals and reads well, and where the learning culture is strong. Under the guidance of Stephen Curry and Draymond Green, in a demanding environment, the curve can rise. But the pressure rises too, because every roster spot matters, and this team wants to win now, not years from now. And that's where the story gets even more interesting, because if you look at the full puzzle, you can feel these conversations aren't isolated. The owner's email, the two-way clock on Pat Spencer, the uneven usage of young pieces, the need for size in the paint, the self-critique about Jimmy, and the sense that the team is close to choosing between keep insisting and change, all of it creates the kind of environment where an apparently simple decision, like converting a contract, can be the first step in something much bigger. Because the moment that conversion happens, the question won't be only Pat stayed. The question will be, what door did it open, and what door did it close? Because if the franchise touches a roster spot now, it isn't just regularizing a player, it's deciding who stays untouchable and who becomes trade currency when the phone rings again and the conversation stops being theory and becomes real negotiation. And from there, no one will be able to pretend they didn't see the signs when they were right in front of us, starting with how certain decisions were delayed until they couldn't be delayed any longer, and how the silence around certain pieces started sounding too loud to be just coincidence. And that's why I keep hammering the point. Pat Spencer's conversion, by itself, isn't the end of anything. It's a warning. It's the kind of move that forces the team to show its hand, even if only a little. Because when you make a piece official, you set priorities. You choose who enters the circle of trust and who's exposed when the rotation tightens. And most importantly, you reveal whether this franchise is only trying to put out fires or whether it's preparing a real change, the kind that reshapes the roster and changes the direction of the season. So if you felt this vibe is different, comment below what you think is behind all of it. Do you believe Pat is going to become a real part of the rotation, or just a name regularized to tick a box? And do you think the silence around Kuminga is purely a coaching decision, or is there behind-the-scenes strategy in play? Now, before you go, don't forget, hit the like button and subscribe, because that helps a lot in reaching more fans and keeps us bringing these reads with calm, detail, and honesty. Turn on the bell too, because if something happens, I'll bring it here right away. And if you want me to continue with more parts of this script, tell me in the comments and I'll carry on from exactly where we stopped.